Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 10 of Duval Rundown, presented by Injury Care Centers. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by Hays Carlyon to discuss what went wrong for the Jaguars in their lopsided loss against the Bills on Monday Night Football and where the team can go or should go moving forward. But first, we're going to start out, as we always do, with a little bit of Jaguars trivia. The Jaguars lost by 37 points to the Bills last night, the second worst margin of defeat in a primetime game in franchise history. This stat is heard through Gene Fournette on Twitter. I believe it's also the second worst margin of defeat in any game, but including primetime. So the question is, which team handed Jacksonville its biggest loss in a primetime matchup? Was it the Minnesota Vikings in Week 16 of 1998, the Colts in Week 4 of 2000, the Titans in Week 6 of 2010, or the Falcons in Week 15 of 2011. I still got to get a little sound effect for this for trivia, but the correct answer is A, the Minnesota Vikings in Week 16 of 1998 defeated the Jaguars. I believe the score was 50-10, but it was definitely a 40-point victory. And like I said, I believe it was the largest deficit just in franchise history, period. And so, yeah, a lot of doom and gloom to start this week, but we are pleased to be joined by Hays today to, again, just break down what went wrong and more so just where did the Jags go going forward. So, Hays, just starting out, what was your kind of general takeaway from last night's game?
That it's over. Really, I just don't see how ownership can view what happened last night as anything other than the closing argument from the players that this coaching staff isn't reaching them. And, that's really unfortunate. Even by NFL standards, this has been a staggering decline in terms of Doug Peterson, who, did a magnificent job in his first year when he arrived. The relationship, the trust between players and coaches was fractured because of the Urban Meyer debacle. And, Doug Peterson did a great job building that back and had a great first year. And then started out 8-3 last year. And you thought, this is going to be the guy here for a long time, but it is just completely fizzled out in a way that I think it would have been impossible to predict. But 1-8 now in his last 9. He's lost his last 8 games with Trevor Lawrence as a starting quarterback. And to me, that's the defense obviously played awful after 2 pretty good games. They fell apart. And certainly we can break that down as well because that was disturbing. But to me, the essence of where the Jaguars are right now is Doug Peterson is obviously not reaching Trevor Lawrence for whatever reason. And that's not to say Trevor isn't to blame, but only one of these two people have $200 million in guaranteed money committed to them moving forward, and it's Trevor Lawrence. So he is going to survive. And I just think at this point, if you're Shad Khan, you've got to try to salvage Trevor Lawrence. And I think the longer that he's with Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole. So to me, players can talk and say all the right things, but their actions are what you have to monitor. And their actions last night on both sides of the ball made a very clear sentiment to ownership of, we're not listening to this guy. This guy isn't reaching us, and he's unable to motivate us.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything, especially your point about Trevor, where he certainly isn't blameless. But I made the point on last night's Duval Rundown show. Thanks to everyone who joined that. It was had a lot of people that were upset, and rightfully so. But I made the point that I thought Trevor, all of his mistakes, not just last night, but this season, has been a sign of just a lack of confidence in kind of the system around him, including some of the players, especially the offensive line and the offensive tackles, but especially the coaching and the system. And he seems pretty much fed up with it. And so it's like, even though he did miss a few passes that he should have made, it's not like when you watch Bryce Young and you're like, okay, this guy can't play in the NFL at all. I think, like, I'm definitely holding on to my Trevor Lawrence stocks, and we'll see if the Jags are able to kind of resurrect his career, because he was supposed to resurrect the franchise, but now, like, they got to kind of both help themselves out. And so I think this offseason, or like going into the year, it was fair for people to question, like, if the Jags aren't true Super Bowl contenders, is it because they don't have enough pieces on the roster to contend, or is it because the coaching staff isn't getting enough out of those pieces? And while I don't think anyone would say that the Jags have a Super Bowl level roster, I think at this point everyone is agreeing that it's more so the coaching for not getting as much out of the roster. And that was very easy to see last night on Monday Night Football for everyone nationally to see. And so my next question for you is, like, now the big topic in Jacksonville is what comes next for the Jaguars. And maybe they bench a player, maybe they do some other kind of small change. But at this point, it seems kind of similar to the Billy Napier situation in Gainesville, where it's not if, but when, in terms of Doug Peterson being let go. And so what do you expect to be the first domino to fall in terms of who will get fired, and when do you think that could be?
Honestly, I think it's one of those things that Shad Khan will probably let it go a little bit longer, just based on the fact that you still have 14 of these things left. I do think, unlike the Gators, Doug Peterson has built a pretty good staff in terms of, handing it over to somebody as an interim, whether that's Mike McCoy, which is what I would do, the quarterback's coach. You could give it to Heath Farwell, which would probably create maybe a little bit less disruption on the offensive side if you handed it over to Heath Farwell to be the interim. But Mike McCoy has had coaching experience with the Chargers from 2013 through 2016. So to me, that would be the more natural fit. It puts a lot on his plate because obviously, his first decision would be to fire Press Taylor. So, but I think that'd be the best course of action. When Shad gets to that point, it's hard to speculate. I certainly don't. While I think it should be done today, I don't know that it will be. Because of how many games they have left. But again, in looking at it, yet the math still lines up with, okay, yeah, you could maybe turn this around. But I just look, use your eyes and look, and certainly the history of the league doesn't align well when you're 0-3. But this is a team that still has to play all of its division games. They've never gone 5-1. So 4-2 is your best scenario there. History tells you. You still have games against Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, the Jets. I'm probably leaving somebody out, but 4 or 5 really good opponents left outside of your division. And so obviously, for them to finish 9-5 to get to 9-8, which would be a winning season, might not be enough to get them in the playoffs, but at least would be a winning season. The road is it's just not going to happen. This team isn't going to show what they've shown through the first 3 weeks and then go 9-5. I mean, if you look at where they are statistically, I mean, it's dreadful on both sides of the ball now. But, you look at the offense and, you're 27th in yards, you're 28th in sacks allowed, you're 30th on third down. You're 27th in the red zone. You're 30th in time of possession, which speaks to them not being able to stay on the field, convert those third downs. And you're 30th in points scored. I mean, that's not going to all of a sudden fix itself. And that's before you get to the defensive side of the ball. There's been 111 takeaways so far in the NFL this year. The Jaguars don't have one. They are the only team in the NFL that is yet to generate a takeaway. So to suggest that this team is going to somehow find their way to a 9-5 record over their final 14, it's a complete fallacy. So when it happens, how it happens, my guess is it's going to be further down, maybe when they get back from London, something to that effect. But to suggest that this is going to get turned around, I think it's just delaying the inevitable. And again, I would be really worried about Trevor Lawrence. This has the potential to become fairly toxic with him and Peterson. So I think it'd be best for the long-term health of the franchise for Shad to go ahead and fire Doug Peterson. And obviously that would mean Press Taylor gone too. And now Trevor Lawrence can maybe breathe a little bit of fresh air. Maybe he works well with McCoy. Maybe that'd be something worth, pursuing and seeing what it looks like. But at the very least, I think you'd be able to move on and know that a fresh start is coming. And that introduces a whole other subject on who will they target, who should they target. But if I had to make a prediction to answer your question, I still think we're looking at late October, November, probably for a change. But it should be done today.
Yeah, I've said after each of the Jaguars' losses so far this year that I would expect a decision to be made after the team returns from London if it's still looking pretty brutal at that point, and all signs are indicating towards that. Then I think Peterson could get let go at that point. But I agree with you where like the sooner the better, because it almost feels like the Urban Meyer year where everyone was just waiting around for Urban to be fired because everyone knew it wasn't working and it wasn't going to work. And so it makes sense just to kind of like wipe the slate clean as soon as you possibly can and just give Lawrence and the rest of the team that little breath of fresh air and maybe see if they can build some momentum going into next season. I also liked your point about either Mike McCoy or Heath Farwell being brought in as the interim head coach, because I think a lot of people would assume that Ryan Nielsen would be the interim just because he's the kind of next highest guy up on the coaching podium behind Doug Peterson as head coach and Press Taylor as offensive coordinator. But he's also still pretty relatively young for an NFL coach, and he's only been calling plays. This is his second season. And so I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they went with a more just experienced guy in Mike McCoy, who's the current quarterback's coach. Or I love the Heath Farwell point too, because I think he's kind of a rising guy in the coaching ranks and has been a really good special teams coach for the Jaguars. And so that could be a nice stabilizing force for Jacksonville. And so to the last point I was going to make is that just Mia made a really good point on last night's show, which is that Doug Peterson has said during the offseason, then going into the season too, that it's his offense and he kind of is taking on responsibility for the offense and the team this season. And so partly because of that, I feel like the play calling doesn't even really matter whether it's Press or Doug, because at the end of the day, it's Doug's offense and Doug's responsibility. So even if Press is calling plays, like the responsibility still lies with Doug. You can't just make Press a scapegoat. So I'll be interested to see because I don't think it makes any sense to fire Press and keep Doug. Like I think Doug is going to go, but really I would assume that Press is also going to go along with Doug because they're so tight knit and such a clear tandem kind of working together. At the same time, I feel like it's in most cases an NFL coach is just fired and it's just that one person and the rest of the staff just kind of keeps going at least for the rest of the season. So I'll be interested to see if/when Doug gets fired, how many of his assistants also get fired as well. And so to move it forward to the future, just who do you like as head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2025 and beyond?
I mean, personally, I would love to cover Bill Belichick. I think it would be a tremendous learning experience, but I just don't think that's the direction that they should go in. It's the direction they might, but it's 72. That's not where I would go. They've got to find the next up-and-coming offensive mind. And yes, that opens you up to hiring somebody that's never been a head coach. I understand all of that, but they've got to go find the next LaFleur, the next McVay, somebody like that, the next Kyle Shanahan. And so I think you look at Ben Johnson in Detroit, what he's doing, 38 years old, fantastic offensive mind. You could look at Clint Kubiak with the Saints, what he's been able to do, take a little bit of a look there. Joe Brady, who we saw last night for the Bills, has really resurrected his career, doing some great things there in Buffalo. He would be somebody that I would be interested in. And Mike LaFleur, Matt's younger brother, is the helping McVay run that offense for the Rams. And again, you look at what they were able to do this past Sunday, being down a bunch of players, including Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. They still score 27 points. They still get a victory. That's just one slice. That's one game. But it speaks to the point of there are plenty of teams that have a bunch of injuries and they still produce. Look at Stefanski last year with Cleveland. They still produced. So I'm not buying this anymore. They had a bunch of injuries at the end of last year. Okay, well, that doesn't excuse losing to Tampa Bay 30-12. It doesn't excuse losing to Baltimore 23-7 on December 17th. It doesn't excuse losing 28-20 to the Titans in the finale. Like, there's been a lot of bad football here. We sort of gave them a pass going into this year, because of the injuries. But now that you've seen the 0-3 start now, I think it's much easier to go back and connect that maybe this wasn't injuries. Maybe this is just an obsolete offensive system. And I think in once you make that conclusion, you now need to go find where is the league evolving to offensively and go and harness that in your next hire. And you're going to have to run a risk. I mean, who knows if Ben Johnson can lead a room, a group of men? We don't know that. But what you do know is this: you're down to your last strike with Trevor Lawrence. You're going to have to find a coach that believes in Trevor Lawrence, but you're also going to need to find a coach that can teach Trevor Lawrence and can connect with Trevor Lawrence. Shad Khan needs to be looking for the next Sean Payton, Drew Brees partnership, something that can be here for 10 or 12 years. And so that's why, again, with Belichick being 72, that's not, I mean, could he clean some things up? Would they be run at a more efficient level? Sure, I can buy all of that. But I think really what this hire needs to be about is you've committed $200 million in guaranteed money to this quarterback. You've got to go find an offensive coach that can unlock whatever the full potential of Trevor Lawrence is. That may not be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That may be a top 10, a top 12 quarterback, whatever it is. I believe Trevor Lawrence can be that. He's got to be with the right coach. And so that would be the goal here for me, is get an offensive mind from this league and hope that as a first-time head coach, you find the next LaFleur, the next McVay. You know, the good thing about the NFL is these guys don't leave. If you find the next superstar, they don't, you know, you don't look up. It's not like college and you look up and, oh, he took the Cowboys job. It doesn't work like that. So, so go ahead, try to find the next guy. That should be the vision that Shad Khan has for this search. Find the guy that can unlock whatever potential Trevor Lawrence still has within him.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like Shad Khan kind of has a decision of whether to go for kind of the team builder, team motivator, CEO type head coach, like a Mike Vrabel or a Bill Belichick, to kind of just turn the franchise around and teach the players how to win football games. But then on the other hand, you can go with like a young hotshot offensive play caller to pair with Trevor Lawrence, which makes a lot of sense, especially considering Shad Khan has already taken the former path a lot in recent years. First, he brought in Tom Coughlin back from the Giants to run just football operations, and that didn't turn out very well. Obviously, there was kind of some episodes with NFLPA report cards and the whole Jalen Ramsey saga, even the Yannick Ngakoue saga a little bit. And then after that, they brought in Urban Meyer, who is a decorated college football head coach. That clearly didn't work. He was maybe one of the worst NFL coaches in history. And then they brought in Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach. And so they've been trying to bring in like these adults to the room, and it just hasn't been working. And so like maybe Vrabel or maybe Belichick would be different, but I wouldn't be surprised if Shad Khan wants to try to go away from that plan of like looking at past production and instead looking at what the future could be with a quote unquote young hotshot offensive coordinator. And so I'm definitely team Hoodie, as I've been putting it, team Bill Belichick, because I think with his age, I think that almost makes it more of like a better fit, because he's not going to be around for a long time. And so like you can say clearly he just wants to get to the all-time regular season wins record that's currently held by Don Shula, and he's 26 regular season wins away. And so he's only going to be a head coach for 3 or 4 years. And I do think he wants to be a head coach, because I don't think he'd be doing as much media as he's doing this year if he didn't. I think he's just trying to stay relevant. And so I think it would make sense to bring in Bill and kind of, again, just have him reset the tone and the culture of the franchise, teach the team how to win, and then have a succession plan in place, kind of like Gerard Mayo in New England. But again, like you were saying, I think it like makes a lot of sense to pair someone with Trevor Lawrence, because at this point, if he wasn't already, he's the face of the franchise with the $275 million contract. And so 3 other names I had written down was Joe Brady was definitely one that you said, especially after watching how well the Bills moved the ball last night against the Jaguars. He was the offensive play caller for LSU's national championship team in 2019 when Joe Burrow broke a bunch of records. Then he was in Carolina for a little bit and got scapegoated out of that just coaching staff under Matt Rule. And now he's kind of doing great things with Josh Allen, who's the MVP frontrunner right now in Buffalo. And then two other ones I had written down were Mike Kafka, who's currently with the Giants. I know that Brian Daboll gets a lot of props for being a sharp offensive mind, and that's fair, but I also think Kafka does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. He also was pretty instrumental in Patrick Mahomes' development in Kansas City. And then the last one, which is probably my favorite, quote-unquote sleeper, is Drew Petzig, who is the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals. He started his career coaching at Harvard, Boston College, and Yale, and then he was with the Browns and the Vikings for a handful of seasons. And again, now he's currently the offensive coordinator for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. And he's a guy that I think is someone that everyone should have on the Raiders as a person that's going to be hired as a head coach in the next offseason or two. And so if you're looking for the next offensive mind, hot shot, whatever, I think Drew Petzig out of Arizona is definitely one to keep in mind. And so before we get you out of here, Hays, do you want to have a final prediction or your final top guy on your wish list for who you want to see coaching? Or
I'll say the next I'll say the next Jaguars coach is Ben Johnson.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be interested to see because I think he is probably going to be the top candidate, but he's also turned down head coaching jobs in the last two off seasons. So we'll have to kind of wait and see if he feels ready, I guess, to be a head coach. And as you were mentioning earlier, to be able to lead a group of men in a locker room rather than just design cool plays like the hook and ladder that the Lions ran this weekend. And so, yeah, I'll go ahead and say Drew Petzig is going to be my official guess. And so that was a good little look at the future. Thank you for joining, Hays. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you on 1010 channels?
Yeah, sure thing. We'll be on the Frangie show today, 4 to 6 p.m. So it should be lively.
Absolutely. All right, thanks. Thanks, Hays, for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Sure, we'll bring it back. Have a good one, and everyone make sure to check out Hays on the Frangie show. So take care, Hays.
All right, thanks, Gus.
All righty, now we're going to get to our top quote section. We're going to start out with a quote that I've already showed on this show before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. This was Shad Khan addressing the team in the offseason via Jaguars YouTube on an episode of their offseason series, The Hunt.
Thank you, Doug. So it's my privilege here to welcome all of you to the training camp for the Jaguars, our 30th year. About a month ago, we celebrated the city's partnership with the Jaguars and the approval of funding for the new Stadium of the Future. So I met with the reporters, and the discussion obviously quickly turned to football, and I was quoted, "For us, winning now is expectation." So really, I've been looking forward to tonight to set the record straight. I was not misquoted. And let me just repeat, winning now is the expectation. Make no mistake, this is the best team assembled by the Jacksonville Jaguars ever. Best players, best coaches, but most importantly, let's prove it by winning now.
Khan also had some comments earlier in the offseason in a meeting with media members, but it was not a recorded meeting, or at least like you couldn't share audio or video from the meeting. It was just quotes in various, like the AP News and Times Union and stuff. You could find it there, where Shad Khan had a more specific quote or in-depth quote about the team needing to win now. But you can see there in The Hunt that that's clearly his expectations. And so that Khan quote of just wanting to win now has been circulating the internet for the past 24 hours. I thought it was worth bringing it up here to start the top quotes section. So this next video is Doug Peterson addressing media post-game in Buffalo after the Monday Night Football loss. Videos via Jaguars YouTube.
Keep trying to figure out what you want to do as a game plan, or can you go in an opposite direction? Well, I don't necessarily think you go in an opposite direction. You've invested a lot of time, but there has to be changes, whether it's play design, personnel, everything's on the table. Let's call it, right. And those are all things that we have to, I have to look at. We have to look at as a staff and make the adjustments.
We'll see what those changes end up being. I wouldn't be surprised if Cam Robinson or Anton Harrison ends up not starting next week. I feel like that would be the biggest personnel change the Jaguars could make. But yeah, I also thought this clip was interesting because you can kind of tell how defensive and standoffish Doug can be during pressers sometimes. And obviously this was after a huge loss, but he's not exactly an open canvas during pressers in general. But this presser was actually interesting because about halfway through, he sort of loosened up and was just, I don't know, not necessarily more honest, but just more loose and just kind of talking about the loss. And so here's another clip via Jaguars YouTube.
You were able to figure out, or is this a different end?
No, I mean, you definitely have to look back and see what got you through certain tough times, and you just, it's a week-to-week deal. And we're 3 weeks in. We're not very good right now. And we got 2 division games coming up back to back, and I'd say this: no one's going to feel sorry for us, right? I mean, this is who we are right now, and it's not very good, right? And we have to be honest, with ourselves, and I've got to be honest with myself, and just keep plugging away.
Here's one more clip of Peterson. This is a short one.
Markedly better than he's been.
I need everybody to coach and play better. Just leave it at that.
There you go. Now let's hear from quarterback Trevor Lawrence after the loss in Buffalo. Again, video via Jaguars YouTube.
Where we don't have any momentum. It seems like everyone takes their turn on making a bad play at the wrong time, including myself. It seems really difficult to go forward. Can't find that rhythm right now, and we all have our share in it, and it takes us making the plays out there. Players play, coaches coach, and when we step on the field, we got to make the plays, and so we have to take all the accountability, all the criticism, all the scrutiny, because we're not doing that right now, and that's our job, is to go make the plays. And I know that I'm not playing as good as I can play, just point blank. There's plays out there, the one to Brian, which I'm sure you guys saw, like that, just a throw you miss and turns into a turnover. And it's a game where the defense needed us to make some plays, to get some momentum, to settle in, to keep the ball, put some points on the board, give them a little breather, and that, for example, really hurts us. So it's just we gotta make the plays. It's that simple. This game it's hard, but it's not that hard. We made it look really, really hard today, and we're a lot better than that.
One more from Trevor.
Really as simple as just players playing and playing well and consistently playing well, and we're not doing that right now. So we believe in what we're doing, but we got to go do it. There's enough blame to go around for everybody. I think we're all accountable enough to own our part of it, but you can own it, but you got to do something about it. You got to go play better. I need to play really well for us to win. That's the NFL. Quarterback has to play well every week to give yourself a shot to win, and don't feel like I've done that consistently enough. So I put that on myself, and I got to play better.
I just think it's kind of impressive how Trevor faces media after just so many long seasons, especially the Urban Meyer year. Like, I think a lot of the reason that people like myself and Hays and a lot of other people that cover the team are still holding stock in Trevor Lawrence is because we see his interactions on a day-to-day basis inside the building. And he's just been such a stand-up guy, I feel like that's not the best way to put it, but it's just been impressive the way that he faces media and takes accountability. He takes a lot more accountability than the coaching staff has. So yeah. One more clip to show. This is from Jeff Prosser on the drill on 1010XL this morning, doing a classic Prosser rant. This might have been the best one I've ever heard. It's good stuff. Let's take a listen.
Are an abject embarrassment to the city of Jacksonville, to the state of Florida, and to the sport of football. You 53 are the worst laughingstock of any 53, of any 22 that will take a football field for the month. Congratulations. You absolutely flat out, egg on your face, embarrass yourself to the highest level. You almost laugh at you jokers. Holy cow, man. Any amount, any of passion and belief we have poured into you at this point, it's good money on bad. Go away. Holy cow, man. Excuses, blah, blah, I'm shocked, blah, blah. Y'all suck, man. EOS. End of story.
There you go. That was the most entertaining thing I've seen in the last 24 hours. I don't know about you guys. But that's all the quotes that I got for today. So now it's time for some chat therapy. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, should be a lot of concerns. But yeah, what do you guys think? Who do you guys want to see as the next head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars? Because again, I think Doug is in Billy Napier territory where it's a matter of when, not if. So Ben Johnson, you guys like Bill Belichick? I would love Bill. Like Hays said, it would be a lot of fun to cover. Like I would make sure I was at every single press conference just to soak up as much football knowledge as I could, let alone knowledge about the team he was running. But yeah, I think that would be pretty interesting. And it'd be pretty cool for his legacy of not just potentially overtaking Don Shula for the all-time regular season wins record, but then also if he was able to do the same thing Brady did and take a non-Patriots team to the Super Bowl win, then that will be big time. So Joe Mama said, Doug hiding from a presser today or what? He is talking at, I believe, 1:45, but it's in about an hour. He's going to have a Zoom conference with media, so that'll probably be streamed on all of Jaguars' social channels. Donald Cook said, I'm feeling Bill too. Emil said, question is, do you see any college coaches maybe transitioning? I'm honestly not the best person to ask this because I'm just much more of an NFL guy than a college football guy. Yeah, like unless like you want to give Nick Saban a call, which there's no way he's going to take the job, but might as well make the call, I guess. But I can't really think of anyone. I don't know. Kirby Smart NFL coach would be pretty interesting, but no, I don't really see any college coaches, especially after I feel like Jim Harbaugh was a big get last year. Unless it's like a Jim Harbaugh type guy, I don't see anyone coming up from college, especially after the Urban Meyer debacle. Nick Saban as GM, that'll be interesting because I don't know that Saban is necessarily like a bad talent recruiter, but like when Saban recruited, like he was just going after 5 stars and guys who were like objectively the most talented players in their states. And so I feel like it's a little bit more difficult at the pro level when, I don't know, you're just having to go through a bunch of 4 and 5 star recruits playing at the college level. And so Nick Saban as GM, interesting thought, but I feel like head coach would probably be more likely. Tommy asked on Facebook, why are we talking about the next coach? Doug is still coach. Well, not for long, my friend. And to me, the offseason is the most interesting part of just content for the NFL, but especially the Jaguars, because you get all roped up into hype and hope and everything else. And so I think it's just a lot more interesting, especially now when this already feels like a lost season 3 weeks in. DAM commented on YouTube, Trent is going to get a young head coach he can work with. That's probably fair. I think part of the reason that the Bill Belichick thing is interesting is that I don't think there's any way that Bill is going to take a job unless he gets full control of everything. And I think that's part of the reason that he didn't land one this past year. I guess there was probably a little bit of sour feelings just based on the way his New England tenure ended, and that he like missed the playoffs and had Mac Jones, and it was just not pretty. But now that he's taken a year off, I don't know. I still think that he would want de facto GM powers anywhere he went. But I think especially in Jacksonville, where he's like, yeah, I'm not going to put up with like Balky being in the owner's ear and like having me potentially be out of the building before I even get the all-time coaching record. And so, again, I think the Bill Belichick storyline is interesting because I think he would end up being just handed the keys to the franchise as opposed to Balky running the show with some young hotshot. Emil said, feel like Hines Allen was off the field a lot last night. Unsure about the scheme so far. Yeah, I'm unsure about the scheme too. I definitely understand how all the heavy rotations, not just in the defensive line, but also in the linebacker room, is pretty frustrating to see, especially when they're trotting out like Yasir Abdullah and just, I mean, no offense to Yasir, but like guys who are probably not shouldn't be getting as much playing time as they are, even if they're going to get a handful of snaps. The rotations have been pretty heavy. But for me, the most damning thing about Nielsen's scheme so far is just his lack of adjustment going into last night. I mean, he did make an adjustments playing more zone and kind of like shutting down with quick receiving options during the game last night. But I thought even going into the game, he should have had a better game plan. And so now I'm a little bit worried going into this week against C.J. Stroud and Houston's trifecta of amazing wide receivers. And so it'll be interesting to me to see if he continues to go with his man-heavy approach at first with like the likes of Monteric Brown and 30-year-old Ron Darby, who has had a really good season so far. And whether Jarian Jones returns from his shoulder injury or they keep having to trot out Christian Broswell, like those guys are no match at all for Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, excuse me. So I'll be interested to see next week. That's kind of like the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is just how Nielsen adjusts before the game heading into Houston. Oluokun should never leave the field. Lloyd didn't play great. Yeah, Lloyd has been super up and down. Like there's some plays where he looks like he's light years ahead of where he used to be, and then some plays where it feels like he isn't. And so I kind of agree with your point about Oluokun, because even if Nielsen's system or philosophy or whatever you want to call it is to rotate players in order to kind of just give them more rest, not just for the individual game, but for the entire shelf life of the season. Oluokun is just such an important player for the Jaguars, and I don't disagree that he should never leave the field. Jay commented on YouTube, Antonio Johnson has been rough at safety. Yeah, I don't disagree. He just plays so aggressive because he's such, I don't know, kind of like a lightning in a bottle type of player where he's so explosive. He almost reminds me of Andre Sisco coming out of college, because Andre Sisco was the same way where he was super aggressive. And so he would make a lot of plays on the ball that was fun and cool and great, but he would also be over aggressive a lot and miss tackles or let up a big play. And so that's kind of, Sisco has definitely grown from that a lot in his time in the league, but we need to see that from Antonio Johnson as he continues to grow as a second-year pro. And I will say, like, the big third down conversion he led up in man coverage against Don Kincaid was a sneaky great route by Kincaid, kind of like just making him open up his hips or like turn his shoulder. And then right when he did, he like got to the outside leverage of him and then broke off the route. So really great route. Good play call too. But yeah, Antonio Johnson would be nice to see him play a little bit better. Robert asked on YouTube, will Dewey, as in Andrew Wingard or Deshaun Gibson Sr., take over AJ's starting job once one of them returns? So Dewey is currently on the injured reserve with, I think it was a knee injury, but don't double check me on that. And then Gibson is a free agent veteran guy that the Jags signed in training camp, but he's on the suspension list right now and will miss the first 6 weeks of the season. And so I think Antonio Johnson is going to have to play bad enough that like the Jaguars bench him and bring in someone else, as opposed to like Dewey or Gibson being good enough to just take over the starting job as soon as they're available. But between Dewey and Gibson, I think Dewey is probably the more important special teams player, as a core special teams player. and kind of a locker room leader. Like they're certainly locking juice right now, and so maybe Dewey can give them a little bit of that. But I would be personally a lot more confident with Deshaun Gibson playing the safety spot once they both return. Austin asked on YouTube, what is really wrong with this team? Coaching, everything, all of it. Like, there's not one answer. If there was one answer, then I'll give it to you. I don't know. It's a whole mess. I think going into the season, I was expecting for Doug Peterson to possibly get onto the hot seat, but I kind of thought that Trent Baalke wouldn't be gone from the Jaguars organization until Shad Khan passes away, literally. But now at this point, I think it's bad enough where I wouldn't be surprised if they clean house and just have an organizational reset, which I don't know if they've ever done under Shad Khan. Maybe once, like before Dave Caldwell. I don't really remember that tenure as clearly, but I know that Doug Marrone or Trent Baalke was on the Jaguars' staff when Doug Marrone was around, and he's continuing to be around. And so I think it makes sense to do a full-on reset and just start anew. Let's see what else we got. Well, that's about it. I'm going to stop it there because I'm tired, frankly. It's been a long 24 hours, but really appreciate everyone for tuning in both last night and today, and then everyone who's going to tune into our 9:04 show on Thursday morning with Mia O'Brien to talk a little bit more about just where the Jaguars go from here, and then to preview the Texans game in Week 4 more in depth. So, again, thank you to everyone. Thanks again to Hays for joining earlier. Thanks to Injury Care Centers for sponsoring, and we will see you next time.